Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the Proved Producing YouTube channel. Today, we will be doing a field evaluation, working from scratch, kind of show everyone my process, how I go about finding the field, evaluating it, and then ultimately coming up with a amount I would think it was worth. So strap in, let's have some fun and take a look. So we'll start off by looking at some of the resources that are out there. I'll also mention I live in Houston, Texas. So most of the things I'm looking at are in Texas. And thankfully, Texas has a pretty good system for public data acquisition. So this is the Texas Railroad Commission website. It has a list of queries that you can perform to find pretty much whatever you're looking for. We have a drilling permit query, a completions query, field rules, P4, so who is the purchaser, orphan wells, and probably most importantly, production data. There's also a GIS mapping that you can go and look at, which is pretty helpful as well. So for today, I think what we'll do, we'll start by looking at the production data query. So we'll hit launch application. It'll take you to this. You can either search by lease or just search by area or operator. We'll start off by area or operator. We're looking at wells that have been producing over the past 6 months, 8 months, 10 months. So we'll do January of 23 to October of 23. And this is the other selections you can make here. The initial view, which will show the production by lease, by operator, by field, by district, by county. I like to kind of start by breaking it out by operator. So we're looking at production by operator for this date range, both oil wells and gas wells. And then the area I'm most familiar with in Texas is District 2. The way Texas does it is they break out each area of Texas. Might be helpful to show you a map. Pull up a map. So here you can kind of see it. They break out each oil and gas area by districts. So District 2 is South Texas. District 4 is way south. 1 is kind of right in the middle. 3 is over here by Houston. And then your Permian stuff's over here in 8, 7C, 8A. So that's kind of the Texas district map. So if you want to filter your query results by area, typically district is the best way to do it. So we'll look at District 2 first, and we'll see what type of results we end up with. So we can see from the search results, we have 744 total operators in District 2 that have produced some oil or gas in the last 10 months. I like to start by just sorting this by who's produced the most. So this is that list. And I think a lot of my strategy is try to find operators who aren't producing a whole lot and might be interested in one day passing those wells on to someone else. So we'll just jump way down the list here to some smaller operators. And here we go. So this is how much oil they've produced in the last 10 months. This is how much casing head gas, and this is how much sales gas, and then condensate. So let's just jump in and have a look. We'll go one more over. Let's try PTEX. So in District 2, in January, they produced 100 barrels. In February, they produced 85. March, 59, so on, so on, so on. From here, what you would do, or what I like to do, is kind of go to the lease level. So we can see that there are 2 leases that this operator operates in District 2. We'll call it the Deitzel and the Deitzel Herman estate. And then it'll break out how much production was produced off each lease. So if we're evaluating this, the first one, the larger one that's produced 600 barrels in the last 10 months, where I like to kind of start is by clicking on the lease here. We'll get our lease number, and then we can get some more information on this lease. We'll do a. So when you have the lease number, you can look up all the wells associated with that lease by doing a wellbore query. So we're in District 2. I copied my lease number and we hit submit. So there's 4 wells on this lease. We can see their producing depth, 3,000 feet. We can see the county, Victoria, and then some well numbers and the API numbers. So the first thing I always like to do is actually just see where they are on the map. So, if you go next to this API number, you select GIS viewer, it'll actually pull up a map that'll show you where the wells actually are if it loads. I guess while we're waiting for that, the other thing that's particularly interesting is if you go to the lease, you select images, it'll show you all these different things that are filed with the Railroad Commission that provide some interesting information. So let's have a look at this one first. Well, let's actually scroll down to this potential, to the last one. Okay, here we go. So this is a P4. It tells you who the operator is. It's a change of operator, so this is the last time it changed hands. It went from, it might not be the most, this is the most recent one. So this was an older P4. This is a more recent P4. We can see this is where PTEX picked it up. We can see who the manager or the presidents are. We can see the date, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of interesting information if you're trying to reach out to the operator who currently owns it. We'll keep scrolling down. And these are older wells, so they've changed hands a lot, which I would say is relatively common. We'll keep scrolling down here. What I'm looking for is the rules about where you have to set surface casing. Looking for the completion and potential tests. Here we go. So this is a W-2 form. It shows you when a what's called a potential test was conducted. So that's when you first bring the well on, and you want to see how much it produces. You want to see where what depth it's producing from. So these are typically where the bulk of that information is. So we can see that this well or this test was either a completion or a recomplete. Probably a recomplete. Maybe not. We'll find that out in a minute. The date of the test was November 1994. It produced 75 barrels over a 24-hour period and 5 barrels of water, flowing tubing pressure of 210 pounds. We keep scrolling down here. We get all the important wellbore information. So we have 8 5/8 casing. So surface casing set to 324 feet, and then your production casing 5.5 inch set to 3,000 feet. This well is producing from the zone between 2830 and 2930. So, oh no, that's a liner. They have a liner in there. There we go. This zone that's producing from 2920 to 2925 with Packer at 2666. So that's kind of all of the important information that we really need to understand where the well is producing from, how much it originally produced, and what type of potential it had just starting off. Why the map's not loading today? Let's try this map again. Well, that sucks. Whatever. So it doesn't look like we'll be able to see these ones today, but that's okay. So we know that these 4 wells are all producing from around 2,900 feet. Next thing I kind of like to do is go back to my lease query here with the production. We like to go all the way back to when it first kind of got brought on, and then really analyze how the wells declined over time. So since this operator's had it, we can see in February 28, maybe some downhole issues, maybe shut in for a while, who knows. But they brought this back on. It was producing 300 barrels a month, and then has since declined. This is kind of a weird happening. So here in December of 21, it was still producing around 300 barrels a month, then fell off pretty sharply down to about 100 barrels a month, and hasn't really come back since. So it's kind of an interesting observation. Maybe something going on downhole, or something at the surface. So really possibly a potential uplift story there, just getting this well back on its curve. So next thing we'll do is we'll actually look up this lease for longer. So the current settings here only are showing production data back to 2018. We want the production data back to 1993. So I'm just going back to my production query here. And now we'll do a specific lease query. We'll copy in our lease number, go to District 2, move this to October, move this back to 1993. It's an oil lease. And then we get the production all the way back to 1993. And we can see that this, well, this lease was once producing a lot more. Makes sense. It's declined kind of since it's been brought on, like all oil wells do. So what I do from here is I like to download this production data. It'll spit out an Excel file. It's loading. Okay, so here's the production data in an Excel file, and now we can really start to do some analysis of it. So we can see how it's kind of declined over time. Max production of around 3,200 barrels a month. Pretty large amount, 100 barrels a day, and has just been declining ever since. And now I'll show you guys my sheet that I use to kind of analyze this production. I have my spreadsheet open. We'll kind of do a quick walkthrough of how this spreadsheet works, and then we will drop in the production data from the Deitzel and Deitzel-Herman to kind of evaluate how much those two leases are worth. So this is kind of the input page. We have an input for all our major costs, and then we have an input for our variable costs like disposal and transportation of the oil. And then we have inputs for stuff that are kind of field related. So working interest, taxes, the price deck, our gas oil ratio, water oil ratio. Then down here, we have kind of our debt inputs. So how much debt would you put on it? And then how would that debt affect your returns? And then on this output page, we have kind of the important asset metrics. So PV10, 15, 20. your next 12 months EBITDA, your daily oil, and then production costs. And then some purchase metrics. So if we were to buy this at a 2x cash flow multiple, what would that price be? The PV10 times dollar per flowing BOE times, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the input-output page. We'll kind of revisit this at the end. Moving over, we have our price deck page. So this is the price expectations over the next 30 years, call it, for both oil and gas. And then we have our financials page. This will sum up all our financials across the two leases. This is the individual lease financial page. This is just the lease level cost page, so how much we produce, the cost associated with that production, and then kind of your PV10 analysis at the end here. So we'll start off by kind of looking at these type curve page. So for the Deitzel, sorry, this is some old data. We'll delete out this old data first. And then fresh. So what we'll do now is we'll upload our new production data into this oil column, and then we'll perform some decline curve analysis to get a good fit on it. So I'll pull up my production data here. Back to 1993. Copy this. Copy this over into our spreadsheet. Fresh. And there you have the updated curve. Up here at the top, I'll change my date to 01-01-1993. That way my dates match. Fresh. Okay. So with our production data in here, we can see that it peaked at around 3,500 barrels per month at the lease level. So we'll start off by changing this to 3,500. Hit refresh. So we're getting closer now. This thing is in exponential decline, so we'll keep our B factor really small, and now we'll start increasing our decline factor. So let's change this to 0.02 and see what it looks like. So a little too fast. 0.008. Let's try that. Getting a much better fit now. Maybe still a little bit high. So we'll change this to 0.009. And that's a pretty good fit. So we can see we've matched the historical production with our decline curve. So using that, we can predict what this lease will produce going forward. So if we look down here towards the end date, we can see in the first month of 2024, we'd expect this lease to produce around 126 barrels in that month. So that's kind of how we start by projecting out. If we go over to our lease information page, we can see how this lease is expected to decline out until 2050. So it reaches around 7 barrels per month by 2050. So that's the production data for the Deitzel. Now we'll go ahead and update the Deitzel Herman. So I'm going to go back to the Railroad Commission's website, go over to my specific lease query, go back. So this is the other lease in question. So I'm going to copy this lease number over. We'll first take it over to the wellbore query to see how many wells are on the lease. So 3 wells on this lease. all producing from 2,900 feet, similar to the first Deitzel lease. And now we'll look up the long-term production for this lease. Change our date to 93. Okay. So very strong production back in 93. You're looking at 1,600 barrels a month. Decline. What has it done most recently? Let's have a look. So really, in 2018, it was producing 150 barrels a month. And then we start encountering some issues in 2020. So maybe they shut these wells in and then just haven't been able to bring them back since. That's kind of what it looks like to me. Maybe some downhole issues after shutting them in. So now they're not really producing anything, but there's probably potential there to turn these wells back online. So we'll download this information and we'll update our spreadsheet to include this production as well. Don't convert. So I'm going to copy this over. Here we go. So now we'll get a good fit on this one as well. Peak production was around 1,700 barrels. Change this to 1,700. And it looks like our decline's a little fast. So we'll move this down similar to the other Deitzel unit. So getting pretty close there. Let's change. And I feel like this is probably a decent fit for that end period time. It might need to be a little smaller. So we can see it kind of falls off curve a little bit here, flattens out, and then kind of enters this exponential decline going forward. So this is probably good for now. So now we have both leases with updated production information. I forgot to change my date on this one. Change. So for the Herman Deitzel, if we were to bring this online, we could expect around 88 barrels a month. For the other Deitzel unit, we're talking 125 barrels a month. So now with this information, we'll go back to our input page and change some of the costs associated with this lease. So this lease doesn't produce gas, so compression is 0. Labor, there's only 7 wells total, so really it shouldn't be too much of an expense monthly to have someone, a contract pumper, watch over it for you. So we have $1,000 per month for the Deitzel, $500 for the Deitzel Herman. The miscellaneous expense I kind of just use as a plug to make sure my production costs aren't too high or too low. So just assume $200 for now. The first lease, Deitzel, had 4 wells, so 4 pump jacks at 3,000 feet deep, so assume 5 horsepower motors, and that spits out our electricity cost. We then have our P&A cost, $20,000 per well, and our pump replacement cost. So the pump replacement assumes every 24 months you're going to have to change a pump or change a rod, and then it assumes $5,000 per well per pump change. So every 24 months, you're spending $5,000 times 4 wells, so $20,000 to fix the well, basically. On the variable cost side, we'll get more into this. So the takeaway for our liquids, our oil, is $1.50 for each lease. Takeaway for our gas is 70 cents. We don't have gas, so we don't have to worry too much about that. And then disposal cost, which we'll look more at in a minute, right now is 25 cents a barrel. So that assumes that they have a disposal well on the property. If they don't, we'll make that number higher. So our working interest, or our net revenue interest, is 80%. This is kind of the number that's really tricky to find. Really, I think if I were to perform this evaluation and reach out to this operator and kind of offer this evaluation for food for thought, this would be a number I would maybe request for them to send over, because changing this number will ultimately change how much this property is worth. Gas oil ratio 0, NGL yield is just a number that I assume, but we're not going to have NGL since we don't have gas. And then water oil ratio. So this is a super important thing to figure out, and really kind of influences the end cost. So I'll show you what I typically do for this. So if we go back to the Railroad Commission query menu, and we scroll down to this well status report query, we'll launch this application, select individual well reports, and then District 2, and we'll use our lease ID. We'll start with the Herman Deitzel 06068. And what this should provide is a list of all the times this well has been tested. So we'll scroll over to the most recent one and have a look. Ooh. So you can see, yeah, this is going to hurt the economics here. So this well in the most recent month, and this is probably why they're leaving the Herman Deitzel shut in, produced 1.5 barrels of oil and 210 barrels of water over the test period. So what does that work out to? What's our water oil ratio? 210 divided by 1.5. So 140 barrels of water per barrel of oil. So we'll scroll over. Open up our evaluation page again. Change lease 2 to 140 water oil ratio. So watch how these numbers over on lease 2 are going to change. Yeah. So from $123,000 to negative value because of that water oil ratio. So that explains why they have this well shut in. It'd be interesting. Let's actually have a look at some older ones and see if it's always had a water problem or if this water kind of developed recently. So we'll go back here. Yeah, so it's always been a super high water producer. So the most critical component of this lease is how you dispose of that water and how cheap can you dispose of that water. With kind of my base level assumptions of 25 cents a barrel to run your own injection, this is looking like it's not going to make a whole lot of money. Okay, so that was the Deitzel Herman. Let's look at the other Deitzel and see where that lands. So 04351. Return to my search. 04351. Go to the most recent one. Let's have a look. So pretty similar here. Around 75. 125 plus 145 plus 150, 420. 2 plus 2.5 plus 3, 7.5. 420 divided by 7.5. So 56 barrels of water per barrel of oil. So we'll update our water oil ratio to 56 and see how this updates. So again, we went from $150,000 in PV10 value down to $95,000. So quite a change. And really, I think maybe these disposal numbers are a little high for this particular lease because it's so much water. So let's just see what happens if we change some of these around. Yeah, so you can see how it has a huge effect on the value of these wells just on how much you can dispose it for. So really, the key to operating these 7 wells is focusing on your disposal costs, minimizing them, and really that's about the only way you can do it. So without more information on disposal costs specifically, it's really kind of hard to move forward with this. So if we assume 10 cents, we can kind of come up with a number for what to pay. So on our output page over here, we have a total PV10 of 222,000, PV20 of 190. Next 12 months EBITDA of 85 grand. Daily oil 7 barrels a day. And then I think for now, let's take our debt number, put that at 0. Assume that we buy this with cash we have on hand. And what I like to do is just change this purchase price or total cost over here to have a next 12 months cash flow number of 2 times. So we'll lower this. It needs to be a little bit lower. That's pretty close. So $110,000 for lease 1 puts us at a 2 times multiple. We're paying pretty close to PV20, and it works out to around $33,000 per net flowing barrel. So now on lease 2, we'll do something similar. So we'll lower this to 80,000. 2.5 times. It needs to be a little lower. $70,000, still a little high. Let's try 60. A little low, 65. That's pretty close. So to reach a 2 times multiple, you're looking at paying $175,000 for these 7 wells. Your next 12 months cash flow will be approximately $85,000. So paying $175,000 for $85,000 over the next 12 months, pretty good return, pretty nice yield. So our IRR at this purchase price is around 20%. So that's pretty much how I go about evaluating leases. I think it's pretty interesting information and pretty powerful tool. At the end of the day, you just take production data, you take whatever other public information you can kind of find, and then really come up with a number at the end to tell you how much a certain lease is worth. So pretty cool stuff. I think that'll pretty much be it for today. Well, let's look at one more thing. So the price deck is another super important piece to all this. I'm assuming strip pricing. If we change our price deck to flat 80, let's call it, so that's price deck 5, update these numbers, you can really see how the value starts to change. So we went from, 222,000 PV10 to $300,000 just by updating that price. If you want to change it to a flat $100, you'll see some real crazy stuff. You're talking a PV10 of $462,000. So a doubling of the actual value of the lease just by changing the price deck from strip to 100 flat. So pretty powerful stuff. And then, if you're more pessimistic, we can look at a flat 40 price deck, and it's not going to be pretty. Yeah. So you're looking at if you're thinking of oil prices are going down and staying low forever, purchasing oil wells is probably not the right plan or the right strategy for you to implement. So I think that's it for today. Appreciate you guys joining me. Would love to hear any feedback you might have. Shoot a comment in the YouTube comment section, or reach out to me through the page, or whatever however you see fit. So thanks for joining me. I'll be back probably next week with another evaluation. So thanks, guys. I'll talk to you later.